Hi, my name is Brooke, and I want to talk a little bit today about the awakening that is occurring with many people across the globe at this time. Many people are using the term spiritual awakening, or ascension is even being used, or enlightenment, or the quest for enlightenment. Many people are feeling compelled to uh, change various things about themselves. Maybe they're becoming more interested in spiritual things like meditation, or um, maybe they're feeling like their job is draining them and they're feeling like they can't continue on in certain veins anymore. Maybe their social pattern is needing to change. There are a lot of things that are happening with people that a lot of people can't describe. This is part and pieces of the awakening. The spiritual awakening, the ascension, and the quest for enlightenment that people are coming into so heavily at this time is ultimately going to be pointed back to the awakening of the person's Kundalini. Now, what is the Kundalini, and have you ever heard of Kundalini? A lot of people have heard of Kundalini, and they associate it with yoga and things like that. But this is the Kundalini that we're talking about, the divine consciousness that lies within you. What are we waking up to? We're waking up to the truth of who we are. We're waking up to the divinity that we are. We're waking up to the truth of that. That is the Kundalini, and it lies within you, dormant at the base of the spine. The word Kundalini is an ancient Sanskrit word that has been used for thousands of years. The ancients knew about this process and were very familiar with it. They knew how to become semi-divine in a human form, which is what the awakening is pushing everyone towards. And you will move through that enlightenment or that awakening via the Kundalini, which is lying dormant or not dormant. Many people are activated at this time at the base of your spine. And as it moves up through the different centers in your body, it will move out through the top of your head in a merge or a union with the divinity that you are. And then you can bring that divinity in through your expression into this earth or this dimension. That is the awakening. Now, many people are having experiences, like I explained, where they're starting meditation, or maybe they're changing drastic things about themselves. This is all pre-activation symptoms that are pushing the person towards their ultimate activation. The activation is when the Kundalini begins to rise up within you. It begins to start its unfurling. Now, normally this doesn't happen all in one instant. You don't just awaken the Kundalini and you're all of a sudden enlightened, and that isn't really what happens at all. Most of the time, a person will experience a phenomena or a psychic opening or some sort of bombastic experience that takes them to the core and then back, and they think, "Oh, I'm enlightened." But actually, what that is in most cases is it is an activation. So it's an invitation to your activation. When you become activated, your life begins to change. The transition of yourself and your identity begins to go through its work. You begin to start to transition, and it is you're no longer playing games anymore. This is when you are forced, in many cases, to change very specific things about your emotional makeup, your psychological makeup, your spiritual makeup, your physical makeup. So all of the bodies will go through a transition or a purification and a healing. Now, most of the person's path in awakening, for the most part, is spent inside of an activation. Or should I say, the activation is mostly where people are inside of their awakening. The activation phase, so they've had a bombastic experience, or maybe they haven't. Maybe they had some sort of opening. Their Kundalini was activated. It sits at the base of the spine. There's heat there. For me, my energy began to move like this just like a serpent or a snake, which is also used commonly to describe the Kundalini. And in fact, the Kundalini will use that to express through, and that's very, very common. And so this came through me, and it was heat and sort of a low back pain, and then my spine started to move back and forth. That was a part of my activation. But I had a lot of things that happened before that that led up to that moment. There's almost like a prerequisite that needs to occur before you begin or you get launched or thrown into an activation. Now, when I say these things, this is a general idea. It's not true for every single person, because there are people who are activated very quickly through a trauma or through an accident, and they have their activation. However, what is pretty much the same for most people is once they activate, which is the beginning of your journey, really, you are pushed into a format, a severe format of refinement and purification. And that is what you're going to be working on for most of that time until you come to a certain frequency where you have purified and refined to enough to activate through all the way into an awakening or a merge with the divinity that is in you, or the divinity that you are responsible to express. So I think with this awakening, a lot of people think, oh, I'm spiritually awakened because I had some sort of bombastic event. And, that's not really what's happening. That's, you had the bombastic event and you are being now prepared, or you're preparing for your actual merge. And there's a lot of ego work involved in this activation phase. There's a lot of surrender work that needs to occur. You need to work on many, many different things in your psychology and in your emotional areas and in your mental body that need reform. And so when you go through an activation period and you don't do those things, you can become stuck in various chakras or various areas of your makeup and not really know that you are stuck. There's a lot of work to do, and most of the process of awakening, or your journey of awakening, is going to be spent in an activation phase. And that's where, most of the work is going to be getting done. Everyone that is here on the planet at this time is awakening to the return of the Divine Feminine, to the reemergence of the Divine Feminine through themselves. So it is a global awakening. It is a spiritual awakening. It is an ascension in that sense. And the symptoms are all there and that people are describing. But I like to just bring in this video today that it is the awakening to the Kundalini that everyone is awakening to. So in my next video, I'm going to talk a little bit about ways that we can nourish the Kundalini and your activation process. And also later I'm going to be speaking about some pitfalls that we tend to fall into inside of the activation so that we can work through those and maybe not fall into those holes along your journey. So this was an introduction to Kundalini and the spiritual awakening, and I thank you very much for listening, and I look forward to the next video.